Ever wonder what's really going on when you feel high?
Hmm.
Well, today we're diving deep into two altered states, and you probably experienced at least one, if not both.
I think most people have at least heard of them.
We're going to break down the science behind the cannabis high and the alcohol buzz.
Hmm.
And believe it or not, these two, they work their magic in totally different ways.
Yeah, it's like two sides of the same coin, isn't it?
Two sides of the same coin, but different sides of the brain.
Exactly.
But to really grasp how cannabis works, we need to first get acquainted with a system you might not know much about.
Okay.
This is the endocannabinoid system, or ECS. Think of it like your body's own internal control panel, always working, always fine-tuning things.
Yeah.
Mood, memory, pain perception, even your appetite.
Uh-huh.
It's all connected to the ECS.
Right. And the ECS is all about balance. It uses these naturally occurring chemicals. We call them endocannabinoids. And they're like messengers zipping around.
Messenger.
Yeah, messengers. Zipping around, keeping your body running smoothly.
Like tiny little air traffic controllers.
You could think of it that way. One of the most important is anandamide,
Amandamide.
sometimes called the bliss molecule,
Oh, I like that.
because it contributes to, feelings of happiness and well-being.
Happiness and well-being. Okay, so we got this complex system humming along behind the scenes, keeping everything in check.
Yeah.
So where does cannabis enter the picture?
So this is where things get really interesting. THC, the psychoactive compound in cannabis, it has this unique ability to mimic anandamide.
Mick.
Yeah, like a key that fits perfectly into specific locks on your brain cells. These locks are called CB1 receptors.
Okay, so when that key turns in that lock, what happens? What does it feel like?
Well, picture those receptors as control points. They regulate how you process information, how you feel, even your perception of time.
Yeah.
When THC binds to these receptors, it triggers a cascade of effects,
Okay.
including a surge of dopamine. That's our feel-good neurotransmitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
That leads to the euphoric feeling we associate with being high.
It's funny you should say that because I've always wondered about that time warp feeling you get. It's like everything slows down or speeds up. You're not really sure which.
Yeah, exactly. That's THC interacting with the part of your brain responsible for tracking time.
So it's almost like THC is hitting the pause button or the fast forward button on your brain's internal clock.
You could say that. It just shows you how targeted its effects can be.
So cannabis, it's like a precision instrument,
Yeah,
targeting these specific locks in the brain.
precisely.
But alcohol, it takes a completely different route, doesn't it?
It does. Alcohol, it doesn't interact directly with the ECS. Instead, it mainly affects two other neurotransmitters,
Uh-huh.
GABA and glutamate.
GABA and glutamate, those sound familiar.
They're kind of like the brakes and the gas pedal of your brain.
Okay, so GABA's the brakes. What's alcohol doing?
Hmm.
Slamming on them.
Pretty much. Alcohol boosts the effects of GABA, which slows down brain activity, makes you feel relaxed, maybe a little less inhibited.
Less inhibited, yeah.
But it's also kind of cutting the engine at the same time,
Oh, how so?
by suppressing glutamate. That's the gas pedal. This slows everything down even further. It's not a precise key like THC. It's more like throwing a blanket over the entire brain.
So instead of targeting specific areas, alcohol just kind of chills everything out.
Exactly. It slows down communication between brain cells. And that leads to those classic signs of intoxication we all know. Slurred speech, trouble with coordination, reaction times go out the window.
It's like your brain's operating system is running on like a slower processing speed.
Yeah, you could say that.
So we've got cannabis, the precision key, and alcohol, the blanket over the brain.
Right.
But they both lead to that feeling of being high or intoxicated.
Yes.
What about the subtle differences in how they make you feel?
Well, because they work on totally different systems, the subjective experiences are very distinct. With cannabis, remember, it's those targeted effects on specific brain areas that can lead to changes in sensory perception. Some people even experience mild hallucinations.
Hallucinations, really. Does alcohol do that too?
Not really. With alcohol, the main psychological effects are tied to that overall slowdown of brain activity. You might feel more relaxed, less anxious, but also less inhibited, which, can lead to being more talkative, maybe even more aggressive. It really depends on the person.
Yeah, for sure. It's like alcohol just kind of cranks up the volume on your personality,
That's a good way to put it.
whether it's the good side or the bad side.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that both substances can be habit-forming. But because alcohol throws that blanket over your whole brain, it can be much tougher to stop using it once you're physically dependent.
Hmm.
It's like your brain gets used to running on that lower processing speed and struggles to function without it.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've learned that cannabis, through THC, interacts very precisely with the ECS. It's like that key fitting into a lock. Alcohol, on the other hand, well, it takes a much broader approach, slowing down the entire brain and affecting everything from our movements to our moods.
Right, and those different mechanisms of action, they explain why a cannabis high feels so different from being drunk. It all comes down to which pathways in the brain are being affected and how they're being affected.
It's amazing, isn't it? The brain is so complex, and knowing how these substances work, it can really change how you think about them and help you make more informed choices. What are your thoughts on all of this? Now that you know the science, does it change how you view your own experiences with cannabis or alcohol? We'd love to hear your insights. Keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious about the amazing world inside your own brain.
It really is fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. Until next time.